Hello and welcome again to the Writer Review. This is Eric Carruth Writer, and this week we're going to be taking a look back at the 2001 comedy movie titled American Pie 2. Yes, the sequel of the very popular movie that ran throughout the late 90s, well into the 2000s. It launched I should actually say four sequels. And then it shifted to these god-awful, crappy direct-to-video spin-offs, which don't really deserve the time of day, if you ask me. But if you like American Pie, and you like American Pie 2, and you sort of like American Wedding, and then 10 years later, the long-awaited American Reunion, well then I guess this is something that's worth the review. Well, the runtime of this movie runs for 1 hour and 40 minutes long. It is directed by James B. Rogers. It is produced by Chris Moore, Warren Zeid, and Craig Perry. The script was written by Adam Herz. The story by Adam Herz and David H. Steinberg. The characters were based off of Adam Herz. The music was done by David Lawrence, the cinematography by Mark Irwin, and it was edited by Larry Madaris and Stuart H. Pappy. And the stars of the movie are Jason Biggs, Alyson Hanigan, Shannon Elizabeth, Sean William Scott, Eugene Levy, Eddie K. Thomas, Chris Klein, Thomas Ian Nicholas, Tara Reid, Meena Suvari, Natasha Lyonne, Chris Owen, Molly Cheek, Denise Faye, Lisa Arturo, John Cho, Justin Isfeld, Eli Merienthal, Casey Affleck, George Wyner, Steve Schenbaum, Joelle Carter, Joanna Garcia, and Jennifer Coolidge. So, what did I think of this movie? Sure, the old saying is that a sequel can never measure up to its predecessor, and this can be held true to the sequel of the American Pie movie, which basically has the same characters and roughly the same jokes, and the gags repeat themselves, which means that the surprises are gone and the shocks are just not as fresh as they were when the first American Pie came out 2 years earlier. I mean, let's face it, maybe there might be some altering with some of the characters, but one thing we can surely guarantee you is that Stifler, or Steve Stifler, played by Sean William Scott, is still Stifler. He's still a major dickhead, and that has not changed. But then again, I just don't think an American Pie movie would be an American Pie movie without Stifler. You know, it would be almost like MASH without Hawkeye. Can you imagine the show MASH without Captain Pierce? Well, that's kind of like what you would get with American Pie 2. And, it's good to see the old gang back, the guys, which are, of course, Jim, Stifler himself, Finch, Oz, Kevin, they're back. The ladies are back too, like Vicky, Heather, Jessica, Nadia, they're all back. Also, hey, let's face it, Eugene Levy, who just seems to be in almost any American Pie movie thrown at him, he's back. It's always good to have him around. I mean, the guy's a legend in the comedy genre. And it just seems like anytime the American Pie movie comes around, they're always looking for Eugene Levy, and Eugene Levy just arbitrarily throws himself into the fold. Hell, he even starred in those god-awful direct-to-video spin-offs. And yeah, we still, like I said, see the same old things again. Kevin and Vicky trying to pass off and dismiss each other, but then we realize they're actually always meant to be together. There's still, of course, conflicting stuff issues between Oz and Heather. And of course, Finch is doing some kind of weird type of sexual methods just so that he can have another crack at Stifler's mom. While Stifler's mom's crack comes into practice. Stifler is still just as, like I said before, Stifler is still just as much of a dickhole as he was in the other previous American Pie movie. And Jim once again finds himself placed in awkward situations. Only this time, at least, we'll say one thing. At least they didn't repeat the old American Pie movie. Don't worry, he is not masturbating in apple pie this time. But he once again finds himself in other awkward situations, and his father just ironically catches him at the moment. And of course, he always just somehow plays it cool. I mean, even from like the opening scenes where Jem was, like having some goodbye sex to some hot blonde chick in his dorm. And once again, his father walks in. Actually, both his parents walk in and catches them at the moment. Her parents walk in while they're doing God knows what. Well, actually, we all know what they're doing, if you know what I mean. Let's face it, in my broadcast, with the American Pie movies, there's going to be a lot of sexual themed jokes in there. And unfortunately, unless you guys got virgin ears, then I strongly suggest to you guys to turn away. Because if you're going to stop me at any second, you're all out of your fucking minds. But yeah, we all know what's but like I said, when I watch movies, I do know what I put myself into. No, it's not what you think. I'm not gonna go as far as what Jim did. No. Apple pie goes in my mouth, not through Junior. No, Junior stays covered with my pants. Alright, so the movie plot goes, it's like as always, like what you expect from an American Pie movie. A very narrow, thin plot. But of course, it's going to be full of raunchy humor, sexual innuendo, a lot of sex themes jokes, a lot of wild misadventures and escapades. While each and every one of them, at some point or another, is all out for one thing: to get laid. Or to watch people get laid. No, don't worry, this is not a porn movie. But then again, this is a movie that kind of fits that time. Of course, an American Pie movie these days, a movie like this would probably get either watered down or not even get greenlit. But, yeah, so it's their first year graduating. No, not their first year as, undergrads in college. Jim and the gang decide to party at some cottage out in Lake Michigan. And the guys just want to, party on before they head back to grind the books, while at the same time find ways to grind their gears into hot, sexy women. Yeah. But like I said, if you've seen the first American Pie movie, you're pretty much, the sequel is not watered down, which is, I guess, a good thing. Even though the jokes are pretty much most of the time recycled, so the shock factor is not as fresh, and the pie has gone stale and disgusting. Yeah. So now they're spending their summer at a rented cottage out of Lake Michigan, where they decide to party on, have fun, and try to fuck as many girls as they could. So when Stifler's mom showed up, it was pretty much heaven sent. In American Pie, her presence has been reduced as an inside joke. It's like, oh, I'm sure she's bound to show up, and Finch will put little Finch inside of her. So in the first film, we have Jim, played by Jason Biggs, and Nadia, played by Shannon Elizabeth. They were in a situation where, once again, Jim was not aware. Well, Jim and Nadia were not aware that when they were having an orgy, it was being streamed on the internet. Well, of course, you just can't keep 100% repeating the jokes. But now in the sequel, we have strangers that were caught onto a sex scene, and it got the attention by way of CB radios. So, they did alter a few things here and there. And don't worry, like I said, Jim is not has his pie. It does not have his eclair in the pie, if you know what I mean. No, this time he accidentally he accidentally he accidentally he accidentally squirted super glue to his hands, which he actually thought were lube, and he eventually got his hands glued to his he got his hands glued to his dick. Like I said, every time he tries to have a moment to get laid or to practice the art of sex, he always seems to get himself into these predicaments. But the thing of the matter is it's not to say that the kid is some kind of horny freak. No, I mean, Jim seems like a rather good guy. He just seems to put himself into these awkward dispositions. But I think that's one of the reasons why American Pie fans want to see. That's why they come to see these movies. To see Jim put in these unpredictable scenarios. Just to once again see Stifler become... To see how much of an asshole Stifler is. Or to see Finch once again get a bone job by Stifler's mom. That's what we all come to see. We don't really give a fuck about plot or story or how things turn out in the end. Sure, we expect so. I mean, sure, we expect at least a happy ending from the main characters, in hopes that they could find some kind of happiness once the credits roll. But we're really not in for theme. We're really not in for character, even though, in spite of the raunchiness and the sexual innuendo and the sexcapades, we actually do get very well developed characters. And we do get behind them in hopes that that they could actually find some level of happiness, regardless of who they are. In spite of the eat, sleep, conquer, repeat scenario we get in American Pie 2, it's still an enjoyable, raunchy comedy in which the characters are the perfect comic stereo archetypes, I should say, and they all play their respective roles, which I would have expected in a movie like this. It's like, okay, so if you've seen American Pie 1, you're probably expecting to see the same in American Pie 2. Of course, maybe one of the main weaknesses in this movie is you don't get introduced to really any new characters. It's pretty much the same characters doing pretty much the same things. Is that a bad thing? No. Formulaic? Yes. Plausible? For sure. Not worth your time? Well, let's put it this way, to each their own. So aside from the raunchy comedy elements with a plethora of sexual innuendo used for humor, the characters depicted here offer sympathy due to their overall likable nature. It's great that Eugene Levy is back as the world's most level-headed father of Jim, who always has his son's back no matter what sticky situation he's in. Pun intended. Even though he has to go to a emergency hospital so that he could get his hands off his dick after it was been super glued because he thought it was lube. But I mean, if I was caught in that situation, I don't know what I would do to myself. Probably hide in my room the rest of my life and never come out. But still, you know, most of the characters here are at the most likable. And we kind of understand a bit of their situations, even though it's over the top, it's raunchy, but it's also still, and maybe the unpredictability was more so in the first movie. The second one is, you sometimes ask yourself, will these people change? Or are they still just going to be the same raunchy group that we knew from the previous movie? There are so many memorable scenes that you wish you were part of the action and taking part in the gang's many sexual misadventures just for the thrills. They all seem like a very exciting bunch, and their party in the summer cottage, is just really, really good. I mean, the laughs come from the beginning, and it has no end, it has no stops even at the end. I mean, you just really want to hang around with these people. Really. You may think of them as being just a bunch of lecherous guys who have constant perpetual sex on the brains. But they're not. They they are sympathetic and they all have heart. it was refreshing that the gang was back for the second serving of pie. And it's not because they were all obligated to return due to their contractual stances, but simply because they all enjoyed the first outing and because the film needed a bit of continuation of closure to some of the subplots. So after a year of graduating from high school, the gang just finished a year of college, so they decide to get a bit of a sigh of relief by spending their summer hiatus partying at a summer cottage by the lake in Grand Haven, Michigan, which is a very beautiful scenario from what I've gathered, from what I've understood. Well, when I went to Google Maps, I looked at the area and it's quite a place. We could take a great deal of empathy for Jim due to the many disasters he encountered in his last outing. Getting his sex scenes exploited on the internet, his first sexual encounter was one major miscalculation after another, and his prom was a night he'll never forget, even though I bet he wished he would. When he gets news that Nadia is returning for the summer, he's still feels like he's still a novice in getting laid. Yes, I know, Dr. Ruth is rolling in her grave. I mean, I would enjoy actually sitting next to Dr. Ruth Westheimer, and we would be talking to this till our heads explode. Okay, but she's not around. She's not with us anymore. All of a Siza. Anyhow. So yeah, Nadia has come back to town. And he wants to try to get one more chance to stir the pot, so to speak. How many more one-liners can I come up with? I'm kind of running out. Yeah. I don't know. I don't know what Nadia's nationality is. I mean, it's not like I... It's not like I'm trying to be like prejudiced or racist or anything. I do know she does speak with some kind of accent, something like Eastern European. I don't know what the accent she's going for. It could be either Eastern European or maybe possibly a Hungarian. I don't know. But she does seem to actually have some kind of an Eastern European or a Hungarian accent. I don't know which one it is, but it is kind of interesting. It's never really ever been confirmed. So, with Nadia returning for the summer, and he's still kind of like a novice when it comes to having sex, so he hires everyone's favorite camp counselor, Michelle Flaherty, played by Alyson Hanigan, who I bet at that time was like one of the busiest actresses in Hollywood at the time. While she was working the big screen for American Pie 2, she was also working the small screen on Buffy the Vampire Slayer. She's Willow the Witch. And she actually, believe it or not, had to balance both of her schedules just to be in this movie. It's hard to tell which one was actually strictly business and which one was strictly pleasure, because I never really ever quite able to guess. Maybe it was both business and pleasure. I mean, if you work hard or if you find a line of work that you actually enjoy, it could be both pleasure and business at the same time. Work doesn't necessarily have to mean being laborious and overwhelming. So maybe she actually found umbrage to both working the big screen for American Pie 2 and the small screen for Buffy the Vampire Slayer. Well, of course, everyone's favorite band camp counselor, Michelle, who of course always talks about how she actually one time jammed a flute through her ovarian fortitude. So she's offering him some tips on getting proper intercourse with Nadia. And though she might be a little wacky at times, and also openly admits that she is a nymphomite. But still, in spite of her nymphomania within her veins, she actually has a good heart and takes it upon herself to teach him the basics. There is a little bit of a twist at the end. When Nadia does return, Jim actually reveals that even though he thinks Nadia is a nice person with a good heart and a sexy body and lots of other good stuff in between, if you know what I mean, it actually turns out that the person who has been teaching him the basics is actually the person that he's been attracted to all this time. That's right. Michelle is his soulmate. I mean, she's been with him from the first movie, she's been with him in the second. And, at least, like I said, there is a bit of a happy ending. He actually found somebody who he liked, who he loved. Maybe he might like Nadia, but at the same time, he found someone he loved. And that's good. This is actually the kind of scenes in the movie that I like. I mean, there's like a whole lot of subplots that go along in this movie, but this one is the most interesting. Now, just because I may have praised this movie, I mean, I do have to admit there are a few red herrings that are also in this movie. I couldn't really care too much about the whole Kevin and Vicky's soap opera subplot, After last movie, Kevin and Vicky, played by Thomas Ian Nicholas and Tara Reid, they broke up. And now Kevin wants to make amends with Vicky in hopes that they can mend their relationship. There's also a subplot about Oz, who's disappointed that his girlfriend Heather can't come to the cottage because she's studying overseas in Spain. So then they decide to engage in phone sex. And then Finch is doing some strange meditation just so that he can ram his joystick in Stifler's mom. But I think the biggest, which are interesting but not really well fleshed out, the biggest flaw that actually was the most fleshed out scene is also not the most interesting. It involves the gang being imprisoned in the cottage, and they are now subservient by the two occupants of the house, who may or may not be lesbians, though the gang thinks they are. And the girls, played by Denise, Faye, and Lisa Arturo, they blackmail the boys by putting on a show for them. If the guys engage in uncompromising activities, in exchange to watch them engage in sexual activity. I mean, there are some funny moments in that scenes, but this scene wears out its welcome quite progressively. I mean, sure, we get to see some hot lesbian action, but it really was not really that interesting, and I think it went on way too fucking long, and I was wondering when this shit was gonna end. There is some poor taste in humor, especially when Jim enters band camp and then he pretends he's special needs and pretends that he can't play the trombone. Of course, that's really also poor taste. Like I said, it's a senseless taste of humor, especially when Jim, who is not necessarily special needs, although he's socially awkward at times, still pretending to be a special needs is a poor taste of humor. But, it's just because, he's trying to get in on the goods with Michelle, who of course serves as a counselor at band camp. It's just things like that are unfunny, and that particular scene, like, really, really, totally pisses me off. Another big flaw too is that there was lack of female characters. Pretty much they were just in there for the moment because it wouldn't be an American Pie movie without, heterosexual guys trying to get in on some, trying to, get in on some sexual misadventures. And of course, it's always about pretty girls, even though they kind of seem to, like, unpretty shame one of the characters, which also I think is shameless and humor, and is also conducted in poor taste. That just wouldn't fit in with today's narratives of sensitivity. Maybe it was a little more acceptable back 20 years ago, but the humor from 20 years ago was a lot different than what it is today when everything is so PC and watered down. I mean, okay, it's good, it's daring that it's not trying to be PC, and if you are such an oversensitive PC prick, you could take yourself off of your chair and just get the fuck out of here. Because you're not going to find any PC garbage in this movie. You'll see lots of other garbage, but nothing PC. It's just kind of a shame that, like I said, the female characters were given very little to do, with maybe the exception of Michelle. Michelle is like the only fleshed out female character in this movie. Everyone else has pretty much been rendered to just playing smaller roles than the male co-stars. I mean, okay, maybe they're not just vulnerable sex kittens used as trophy prizes for the gang. Oh, they can have as much raunchiness too, like Heather, played by Meena Suvari, who gets her boyfriend Oz, played by Chris Klein, to engage in phone sex while she's studying overseas in Spain. And then you have the whole subplot with Kevin, played by Thomas Ian Nicholas, and his ex-girlfriend Vicky. And of course, they tend to lie to each other about the myriad of sex partners they encountered while in college, but it really was just a lie. Kevin never did, because apparently Kevin has always had feelings for Vicky. And sure, after this movie, they launched 2 more installments, with the gang now married with kids, and then almost a decade later, they reunited for a reunion. And we can just simply just tell those god-awful direct-to-video spin-offs to just spin the fuck out of here. And through the wrinkles, the receding hairlines, and the progressively growing gray hairs. The one thing that never changed all those years is their insatiable hunger for sex. Just as long as the dessert is not served with a slice of pie. Would I recommend this movie? Yes, I would. I mean, there's a lot to enjoy about this movie. It's funny, it's hilarious. And if you're into sexually themed movies, along the lines of like Animal House and Porky's, I think you really will be in for a treat. Are you expecting anything new from the sequel? Not a chance. Basically, if you've seen American Pie, the first one, you'll likely see something you won't see anything really new or surprising from the second movie. So, due to its lack of originality, some poor choices of humor, the female characters really not getting much to do, and some subplots that could have easily been written out and forgotten, I still kind of recommend you guys to see this movie. So if I was to give this movie a scale out of 10, I would give American Pie 2 a 7 out of 10. So I guess this ends my writer review. Thank you all for listening in. If you wish to subscribe to my YouTube channel, please feel free to do so. If you wish to leave a comment, go right ahead. But just remember the 3 simple rules: be kind, be courteous, and please don't be rude. And I will be back again with another movie review. So until next time, this is Eric Corrupt Writer saying, keep watching those movies, and I'll see you around. Goodbye.